Story 1. The Piper of Blackwood Forest. Story 1. The Piper of Blackwood Forest. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, just outside of Portland, Oregon. If you know the area, you know we have massive, dense forests that stretch on forever. They're beautiful during the day, but at night, the fog rolls in and the trees seem to close ranks around you. I was 19, fresh out of high school, and deeply into urban exploration. My girlfriend at the time, Lena, was usually game for anything, so one Friday night in October, I convinced her to check out an old, abandoned logging trail deep in the Tillamook State Forest. Locals called it Dead Man's Loop. We arrived around 2:30 a.m. It was pitch black. The towering Douglas firs blocked out almost all the moonlight. We parked my Jeep at the trailhead and started hiking, using only the red light setting on our headlamps to preserve our night vision. The woods were silent. Too silent. No crickets, no owls. Just the crunch of our boots on the gravel. We were about 20 minutes in, deep enough that the road noise had vanished completely. I stopped to check my GPS. That's when we heard it. It started faint, drifting through the mist. A melody. It wasn't a radio or a speaker. It was a wind instrument. A flute. Or maybe a panpipe. It was playing a fast, erratic tune. It sounded cheerful, almost manic, like a twisted nursery rhyme played at double speed. Toodle-toot, toodle-toot. Lena grabbed my arm. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Probably just some camper messing around," I said, though my gut was twisting. Who plays a flute in the middle of a forest at 3 a.m.? The music stopped abruptly. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. We stood there for a minute, straining our ears. Then, the music started again. But it was closer. Much closer. It was coming from the dense underbrush directly to our right, maybe 30 yards away. Toodle-toot, toodle-toot. "Let's go," Lena hissed. "Now!" We started walking fast, heading back toward the Jeep. The music kept pace with us. It was parallel to the trail, moving through the thick ferns and blackberry bushes with impossible speed. Every time we sped up, the tempo of the flute sped up, mocking us. Then the music changed. It dropped an octave. It became a low, dissonant drone. Suddenly, a massive shape exploded out of the brush directly in front of us. Crash! It moved so fast it was just a blur of gray and matted fur. It didn't look like a deer or a bear. It was tall. It ran on 2 legs, but with a loping, hunched gait. It crossed the trail in a single bound and vanished into the darkness on the left side. I felt the wind of its passing on my face. The smell hit me a second later. Wet dog and rotting meat. Lena screamed. We didn't walk anymore. We sprinted. "Run! Just run!" I yelled. As we tore down the trail, our lungs burning, the flute started up again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the woods. It was coming from behind us, on the trail. It was loud, piercing, and triumphant. We ran until I thought my heart would explode. I fumbled for my keys as the Jeep came into view. I unlocked it, we dove inside, and I slammed the locks down. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I threw on the high beams. Standing in the middle of the trail, right at the edge of the light, was a figure. It was a man. He was wearing tattered, muddy clothes that looked like they were from another century. He was holding a small, wooden flute to his lips. He wasn't playing anymore. He was smiling. His mouth was stretched too wide, revealing teeth that looked filed to points. He slowly lowered the flute and waved. A stiff, mechanical wave. I peeled out of there in reverse, spinning the tires on the gravel, and didn't stop until we hit the highway. We never went back. I looked up the history of that trail later. Turns out, in the 1920s, a drifter known as the Piper used to live in those woods. Legend says he would lure children from the nearby logging camps with music, and they were never seen again. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I know what I saw. And sometimes, when the wind blows through the trees just right, I swear I can still hear that manic, high-pitched tune drifting on the breeze. Story 2. The Code Blue on the Closed Floor. My name is Marcus. I work as a patient transporter at a massive university hospital in Boston. If you know the city, you know these hospitals are old, labyrinthine complexes where modern glass towers are stitched onto brick buildings from the 1800s. I was working a double shift, 3 p.m. to 7 a.m. I needed the overtime because my wife and I had just bought a house. By the time 3 a.m. rolled around on that Wednesday, I had been awake for about 36 hours straight. My brain felt like it was packed with cotton wool. The hospital is a different world at night. The hallways stretch out forever, the air conditioning hums like a dying breath, and the shadows seem to get longer. Around 3:30 a.m., dispatch radioed me. They needed a bariatric bed moved from storage to the ER. The storage unit was located on the 8th floor of the East Wing. The East Wing is the oldest part of the hospital. It was currently shut down for asbestos abatement and renovation. It was a ghost town. Plastic sheeting over the doors, drywall dust everywhere, and lights that flickered constantly. I took the service elevator up. The doors opened to a dark hallway. The air smelled of stale dust and old copper pipes. I was pushing the heavy bed down the corridor, the wheels squeaking rhythmically, when I heard it. Beep, beep, beep. The distinct, rhythmic sound of a cardiac monitor. I stopped. The East Wing was powered down. There shouldn't be any equipment running, let alone a patient monitor. I shook my head, blaming the sleep deprivation. I kept walking. Beep, beep, beep. It was getting louder. It was coming from room 812, about 20 feet ahead on my left. I slowed down. The door to 812 was slightly ajar. A faint blue light was spilling out into the hallway, cutting through the darkness. I crept closer. My rational brain said it was probably a squatter or a construction worker messing around. My lizard brain screamed, "Run!" I pushed the door open. My blood turned to ice. The room wasn't under construction. It looked fully operational. There was an old man lying in the hospital bed. He was skeletal, his skin distinctively yellow, jaundice. He was convulsing violently, his back arching off the mattress. Thick black fluid was bubbling out of his mouth, running down his chin onto the pristine white sheets. The monitor above him was flashing red. V-fib. The sound wasn't a beep anymore. It was a flatline tone. Help! I shouted instinctively, stepping into the room. Code Blue! Room 812! I reached for the wall to hit the emergency code button. My hand hit plastic sheeting. I blinked. The room flickered. The bed was gone. The monitor was gone. The blue light was gone. I was standing in a gutted room filled with stacks of drywall and a lonely ladder. The only light came from the street lamp outside the window. I stood there, hyperventilating, my hand still pressed against the cold plastic sheet. The silence was absolute. "Okay," I whispered to myself.
You need sleep. You are losing it.
I turned around, grabbed the bariatric bed from the hallway, and practically sprinted back to the elevator. I mashed the button for the ground floor. The doors opened. A man stepped in. He was an older gentleman, wearing a vintage-style hospital security uniform, the kind they wore in the 90s, with the heavy patch on the shoulder. He looked solid. Real. He nodded at me. "Rough night, son?" I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Yeah, you have no idea. I thought I saw..." "Never mind." The man smiled. It was a warm, grandfatherly smile. "The 8th floor has a lot of history," he said softly. "A lot of people passed through there. Some of them aren't ready to leave." He reached out and patted my shoulder. His hand was freezing. Not cold from outside freezing. Dead freezing. The cold seeped through my scrubs and stung my skin. The elevator dinged at the 5th floor. "This is me," he said. He stepped out. As the doors started to close, he turned back to me. The warm smile was gone. His face was slack, and coming out of the corner of his mouth was a trickle of thick, black fluid. The doors shut. I rode the rest of the way down to the ER in a state of shock. I delivered the bed, told my supervisor I was sick, and clocked out immediately. I walked to the parking garage, the cold winter air biting my face. I needed to get away from that building. As I was unlocking my car, I looked up. The parking garage faces the east wing. I looked at the 8th floor. It was completely dark, except for one window. Room 812. There was a silhouette standing in the window. It was the old man. He was wearing the security uniform. He raised a hand and waved. A slow, stiff wave. I got in my car and peeled out. I haven't worked a night shift since. And I never, ever go to the East Wing alone. Story 3. The Tenant in the Cellar. My name is Elena. I live in a garden-level apartment in a historic brownstone in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. It's a beautiful neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, old brick buildings, and families walking their doodles. It feels safe. Expensive, but safe. My fiancé, Leo, is a consultant. Last October, he had to fly to London for a week-long conference, leaving me alone in the apartment. Our place is unique. It occupies the ground floor and the finished cellar, basement, of the building. The upstairs belongs to a quiet, elderly couple who spend half the year in Florida. They were gone, so I was the only person in the entire building. On Friday night, I invited 2 girlfriends over for wine and hocus pocus. We were laughing, drinking Pinot Grigio, and ignoring the heavy rain battering the city. Around 9:30 p.m., the buzzer rang. I walked to the intercom panel near the door. The camera showed a grainy black and white view of the stoop. It was empty. Probably just a delivery guy with the wrong address, my friend Jess said. We ignored it. But 20 minutes later, it rang again. Bzzzt. I checked the screen. Still empty. But this time, I saw the wet footprints on the concrete steps. Someone had been standing there and moved just out of frame before I looked. My friends left around midnight. I locked the heavy iron gate at the front entrance and the inner wooden door. I double-checked the windows. I felt secure. I fell asleep on the couch, watching TV. I woke up at 2:15 a.m. to a sound that made my skin crawl. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window that faces the street. The window is protected by iron bars, but the glass is right at sidewalk level. I crept over and peeked through the blinds. A pair of dirty work boots were standing on the sidewalk, right in front of my window. I looked up. A man was crouching down, pressing his face between the iron bars, staring into my living room. "I see you," he whispered. His voice was muffled by the glass, but I heard it. "I know you're alone." I scrambled back and called 911 immediately. The NYPD arrived about 15 minutes later. By then, the man was gone. The officers were less than helpful. They were tired, wet from the rain, and clearly annoyed. "Look, lady," the older officer said, not even taking his notebook out. "It's Brooklyn. We got homeless guys, we got drunks. Unless he breaks the glass, there's not much we can do. Just keep your blinds closed." They left. I felt foolish, but also terrified. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day was Halloween. I had plans to go to a party in Williamsburg. I didn't want to go, I was exhausted, but staying alone in that apartment felt worse. I dressed up as the Black Swan, tutu, heavy makeup, the works. The party was loud and crowded, exactly the distraction I needed. I stayed late, dancing until my feet hurt. I took an Uber home around 3 a.m. The rain had stopped, but the streets were covered in wet leaves. When I unlocked the front gate, I noticed something odd. The mat in the vestibule was crooked, like someone had kicked it. I pushed the thought away. "You're just paranoid, Elena." I unlocked the inner door and stepped into my apartment. It was freezing. I shivered, dropping my keys in the bowl. Why was it so cold? I walked into the living room. The window, the one with the bars, was closed, but the air was coming from the hallway. I walked down the hall toward the back of the apartment, where the spiral staircase leads down to the finished cellar, our bedroom and laundry room. The door to the staircase was wide open. I always keep it closed to keep the heat upstairs. I stood at the top of the spiral stairs, looking down into the pitch-black darkness of the lower level. That's when I heard it. Click, click, click. It sounded like a tongue clicking against the roof of a mouth. Or maybe a lighter being flicked over and over without igniting. It was coming from the bottom of the stairs. "Leo?" I called out, my voice trembling, praying maybe he came home early. The clicking stopped. Then a voice drifted up from the dark. It wasn't Leo. It was deep, raspy, and amused. "You kept me waiting, Elena." My heart stopped. He knew my name. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. I slammed the door to the staircase shut and threw the deadbolt. Then I turned and ran out of the apartment. I didn't even grab my coat. I ran out into the street in my tutu and corset, sprinting to the 24-hour bodega on the corner. I screamed at the guy behind the counter to call the police. This time, different cops showed up. They saw my face, saw the sheer terror, and they took it seriously. They drew their weapons and entered the apartment. They found him. He was hiding in the utility closet in the cellar. He had broken in through a small ventilation shaft in the backyard that led into the laundry room. He had squeezed through a space so tight, the police said it should have been impossible. When they dragged him out, he was smiling. He had my spare house key in his pocket. He had found it in a drawer downstairs. But the worst part? When the police searched the cellar, They found a chair set up directly facing the bottom of the stairs. And on the floor, next to the chair, were cigarette butts. A lot of them. Based on the pile, the police estimated he had been down there for at least 4 hours. He had broken in while I was at the party. He sat in the dark, in the silence, just waiting for the sound of the front door opening, so he could greet me. We moved out the next week. Broken lease, lost deposit, didn't care. I live on the 20th floor of a doorman building now. No garden level, no cellar. And I never, ever come home late alone.